Hi, I'm Dionne at Women's Resource Centre. I'm talking to you today about the theory of change that we developed called Transforming Our Lives, a framework that was developed with members of the London VAW Consortium. That's 22 women's organisations led by and for black and minority ethnic organisations providing pan-London services across London. The core values that members really wanted, that sort of like underpinned the framework, was that it needed to be located within feminist, anti-racist, intersectional, secularist and human rights frameworks. So it took a number of different frameworks and kind of married it together in order to come up with what they wanted. So it's based on the understanding that the work of the women's sector is the key means of effectively achieving gender equality and ending VAWG. And so the theory of change is just that. It's not prescriptive, we're not saying you have to use it, but it's use it as a best practice guide. Women's organisations and mainstream providers providing projects working to address VAWG. The tool is a valuable tool to policymakers, commissioners, funding bodies who are, when making decisions around gender, race and other intersecting inequalities and all forms of violence. The benefits of the theory and change and how we went about it, we believe that the transforming our lives as a model demonstrates how interventions bring unique transformative change based on a rights-based framework, and as such, as I said earlier, looks at sort of like women's empowerment, which is generally a model that's used across the women's sector. Not all of them, but some. So we had several discussions, we met several times over a number of months to sort of go through about 5 steps. And so we had to set the context, and we did that by looking at all the activities, all the barriers and areas of women's lives that weren't really being fulfilled. So for example, a current barrier on state of women's lives was that normalising VAWG and misconceptions, i.e. victim blaming, was a key issue and a big issue which the women felt that needed to be in there if we were to get to long-term success in achieving ending violence against women and girls, that these misconceptions and others needed to be named and addressed. And then we went through sort of carving out and mapping out the long-term change that we needed to have in order for us to have gender equality and end violence against women and girls. So one of the things that came out was that education on VAWG, gender, race and intersecting inequality needed to be mainstream in schools and colleges, that people needed to know this from early on, where they're less likely to have their own set way of doing things. And from there then we had to map out, well, what do we need to do in order to reach and achieve this goal, by looking at all the necessary actions. So again, one of those actions was training professionals to improve intervention and accountability, because they felt somehow that a lot of professionals who were in jobs, whether it be in public life or in public sector, didn't necessarily understand that. And then of course we had a number of assumptions that came up, and how change might happen in a contextual sense. And so an assumption would be that the women's sector will continue to receive funding and have capacity to deal and address VAWG and inequality. So that was an assumption. And then the final part was that we had to then translate all of what was captured into a diagram, and then write a narrative that represented the idea and to illustrate the number of discussions that took place. And yes, I've quickly gone through it all, but it was no way that easy. And I'd like to just say that, you know, thank you to Hanana Siddiqui, who did most of the work on this, and so I've just coming at this stage, which is really easy. So I thank her. So if you want to see the copy of the narrative and the full diagram, you can find it on the WRC website. And I would urge you just to use it as a framework. We're not saying that it needs to be, this is what you need to have, but it certainly provides you with a guide of how you might develop your own theory of change.